Night flight. About 6 years ago, my friend and I attended one of your weekend workshops. I listened and participated in all of the lectures and hypnotherapy sessions and was amazed at what other attendees experienced, although I had no personal results. I was a bit frustrated, albeit fascinated. We were staying nearby at a bed and breakfast, and on the last night, while sleeping, I had a lucid dream that I will never forget. With increasing vibrations, I flew out of the window of the room and found myself flying over a lush green valley with houses strewn around randomly. I knew it was an ancient village, although I do not know where it was. The roofs were thatched. I had a profound feeling that I was observing a place where I had once lived. I then came back to my bed, again through the window, and had the same experience all over again. The memory stayed with me because of the intensity of the vibrations. The next morning, I realized that I had probably experienced a past life episode, but that rather than during the sessions, it was on my own during sleep. Therefore, the hypnotherapy had worked for me, but I must have been resisting it during the active sessions. I often wonder where that little village was, and I would love to go back. Victoria past life memory fragments may emerge in dreams. These are actual memories, not Freudian symbols or metaphors. Victoria's experience was of this type, and it also incorporated elements of a flying or out-of-body dream and lucid dreaming. The daytime regressions, which were not particularly successful for her, may have helped set the stage for its occurrence. I have frequently observed this delayed effect, where the regression experience happens after the session, whether through a dream, or spontaneously in a déjà vu feeling, or in other ways. The mind has been made receptive, and so the memory follows. Patience and practice facilitate this process. If I were regressing Victoria in my office, her dream would be the doorway that I would use to recall that lifetime with the thatched roofs. It is the experience that is important, not the method used to reach it. To illustrate these points, only a day after I conducted a one-day workshop in New York City, I received similar and simultaneous messages from two people who had participated, although neither knew the other. One wrote that she had had no past life recollections at the event and had in fact fallen asleep, just as she had during the previous workshops she had attended, and just as she had every time she listened to one of my regression CDs. The morning after, she decided to play the CDs consecutively and, once again, fell asleep. But this time, she awoke intermittently as they were playing and saw not one but many lifetimes. In the CD, I encourage listeners to visualize their past lives like a strand of pearls on a necklace. This woman had never successfully visualized anything during her many attempts at regression, but suddenly she could very clearly see her child-made necklace with different beads. It was an amazing breakthrough, she wrote, and I must agree. The other participant had also attended the workshop and had not had any past life memories, but she too remained patient. That night, she had a series of dreams. Upon awakening, she described, I fully understood what I needed to do in my life. It was amazing to have the clarity. I suppose my avenue of communication is easiest in the dream state. Now I have the skills to interpret them. Engaging in the meditations during that day's workshops might have seemed fruitless at first, but that very night she had dreams that had elucidated her entire purpose in life. What a wonderful gift to be given. In the next story, Horace presents another potential method to reach conceptual understanding. I encourage you to physically engage in the exercise he describes, if possible, for doing so provides an intuitive comprehension of how reincarnation can occur in the multidimensional universe. Flatlanders. I am a theoretical physicist with a PhD from Yale that I received in 1968. About the time that I read your book Many Lives, Many Masters, I was also reading a number of theoretical physics papers on large higher dimensions. Some physicists now are testing for the evidence of higher physical dimensions. For example, they could test for the existence of a fourth extraspatial dimension by seeing if gravitational forces at very small distances change to an inverse cube instead of an inverse square law. This is still speculative, but it is of possible relevance for your work in giving reincarnation a physically intuitive mechanism. To explain what I mean, I take the ideas of the 19th century author A. Abbott, who wrote the book Flatland. In that book, Abbott describes what it would be like to be a two-dimensional being, and how such a being would experience a strange extra third dimension. From this point of view, consider the model of a hand. Take your hand and place the fingertips on a flat surface. A large enough flat surface would be a Flatlander's universe. Now, suppose the tips of your fingers represent the physical manifestation of a group of Flatlanders. Their interactions with one another would correspond to the tips of your fingers becoming near to one another on the Flatlander's world, the flat surface. I envision the soul of each Flatlander is the whole finger itself. For a Flatlander, the finger would be like a higher three-dimensional manifestation of his physical, two-dimensional self. What happens when the physical two-dimensional Flatlander dies? Lift your finger from the flat surface, leaving behind the two-dimensional manifestation of the three-dimensional soul. As time passes, that same fingered soul arches back down toward the plane, and it plants itself at a different location. The soul third dimension becomes reincarnated into another two-dimensional Flatlander body. The many fingers of the three-dimensional hand become like the many souls that seem to be associated with one another from one two-dimensional life to the next. I have found that this demonstration gives people a much clearer intuitive sense about how reincarnation may occur. It also gives a possible physical explanation of how ESP, mediumship, precognition, and the whole panoply of paranormal phenomena could work. Now all the physicist must do is find experimental evidence for this hypothesized third spatial dimension, or fourth spatial dimension for us, of course. Horace Crater. This is a very intriguing model of the possible mechanisms of the paranormal, and of how physics may one day be able to explain the mystery of reincarnation and the journey of the soul. Physicists have become the mystics of our own age, bridging miracles and science. I remember the words of the great physicist Albert Einstein. A human being is part of the whole we call the universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself in his thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest. A kind of optical illusion of his consciousness. This illusion is a prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for only the few people nearest us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion, to embrace all living beings and all of nature. We can use scientific principles, such as those found in physics and chemistry, to grasp our divine nature, just as Horace eloquently does. For example, in my workshops I often use a metaphor of ice cubes to help explain human nature and the relationship of the body to the mind and to the soul. Imagine if ice cubes floating in cold water had consciousness. There would be discussions about ice cubes from one particular tray to another. Our edges are sharper than yours, or we cubes are clearer and more symmetrical than you are. Eventually, these discussions would lead to arguments, and then to war, and we would have the equivalent of life here on Earth. But we know that if we heated the water, all the ice cubes would melt. Every ice cube, from every tray, would be the same, water. Water has always been a metaphor for spirit. The ice cubes never truly had an independent existence. They originated from water, and they disappeared into it when they were heated. The essence of the ice cube was really the H2O molecule, vibrating at a slower rate. As heat is added, the rate of vibration increases and the ice cubes melt. The entire time, their existence was an illusion. They were just the H2O molecule, just water, all along. What happens if you keep heating the water? Eventually, even this disappears. Everything is steam, invisible but not empty. The H2O molecule is still there, but now it's vibrating at a very rapid rate. It becomes steam merely through a transformation of the molecule. We know this because if you condense or cool the steam, it turns back into water. If you keep cooling the water and you put the ice cube trays back in the freezer, after some time you'll have the ice cubes once again. This is their cycle. Now imagine that you keep heating this steam, in this case, once again, with heat energy. As the H2O molecule splits, you get subatomic particles, quasars, quarks, and other elements of these types. So even beyond the steam are more states, and as you go further and further they become more and more indescribable by human thoughts or words. And this reflects our own nature. Here in these earthly bodies, we are like the ice cubes, vibrating at our slowest rate, solid, heavy. What happens if you heat us? In our case, this is done not with the energy of heat but of love. This is what raises our vibration, the presence of unconditional love, and the capability to open our hearts, to live with empathy, compassion, kindness, and altruism, and to help others to reach their potential. The equivalent of the ice cubes melting into water would be our transformation back into spirit. Our true nature is that of spiritual beings. As we continue to raise our vibration, what is the equivalent of the steam? Well, it would be whatever exists beyond spirit. Then there's whatever exists beyond that and beyond that. So we are, in this sense, like the ice cubes. We have many dimensions, all of which are connected through the vibratory rate. We may talk about the existence of God in the higher planes, but we do not have the words or the comprehension to understand it completely. This is one reason that it is very difficult to answer the questions, why did God even create the earth? What is the purpose? We cannot know what is going on at these spheres that are equivalent to the subatomic particles in the ice analogy. What we do know is that we are here, and that we are the physical manifestation of this highest energy. Our energy is love, not the H2O molecule, but love. In this sense, we do not have to know all the answers. Frequently, I tell people, I don't know, because I really don't know the answer to some of these most difficult questions. But what I do know is that we are spiritual beings whose basic essence is of love, empathy, kindness, compassion, and altruism. These are the actions and attitudes that elevate our vibration, raise our consciousness, and enable us to return to that home where everything is one and everything is connected. Once, as I was explaining the metaphor of the ice cubes, the water, and the steam, I was talking to an audience while sitting in a chair on the podium. I realized, at that moment, that sitting in the chair was connected to the idea of those ice cubes. Here on earth, the chair was solid to me. I trusted it to support my weight, I sat in it, I stood up, I sat in it again. But I was aware that, at another level, the chair was composed of molecules, ones that made up the fabric, others the wood, and so on. These molecules could also be separated into their component energies. So while the chair was solid and supporting my weight, it was also molecules, atoms, nuclei, subatomic particles, and even smaller particles, and eventually, of course, energy. How amazing that an object that I could touch and sit down in was actually pure energy. It could probably power the planet if completely and efficiently harnessed. We are also like this chair, we are physical, but we are pure energy. So when we say that we are not human beings having a spiritual experience but spiritual beings having a human experience, these things are really happening at the same time. Only the smallest part of us is in the body, most of us is not. Consciousness is not limited by the brain or the body but surpasses them. Much like the ice cubes, water, steam, and beyond steam state, we simultaneously exist in the material realm, the spiritual realm, the ones that lie beyond that, and then into the light realms and others that we cannot even fathom. Think of all the solar systems, star systems, galaxies, and universes that cosmologists tell us are constantly being created. These are limitless and of a magnitude way beyond our grasp, yet they are just the beginning. There are also non-physical dimensions, energetic ones, and ones that defy our imagination. It truly baffles the mind and brings us back to the concept that we are humans and yet that we are energy. This is a glimpse into our nature and into the nature of God. When you think in these terms, there has to be something that existed before anything else. Something that had no cause, that had no precedent. When we have a chair or an ice cube, we have a cause, a precedent. There was the water molecule, or the water that existed before we froze it. The chair existed as trees and as plants before it was made into a chair, and those trees and plants existed in their own precursor form, perhaps as seeds. But there is something that had no precursor, that has existed forever, that is incomprehensible to us, that was never formed, that never disappears. Everything else is simply different states of energy, like the chair or the ice cube, except for this. In ancient cultures, some people call this the Tao. We say the same thing when we say, trust the process. That means following the Tao, or the way, or the flow. The words do not matter, it is a concept of a wise and loving intelligence that has existed before creation, that will always exist, and that from which emanates everything else, all the ice cubes, water, and steam, the chair. Our bodies, our spiritual nature, and whatever lies beyond that. It is something wise, hidden, and completely and unconditionally loving that lies as a foundation of all created things. In understanding this, we are able to let go of those things that are not important. Fame, success, recognition, money, objects. We take none of these things with us. What we bring back are those lessons that we learned and mastered. We bring back the opening of our hearts. It does not matter if we do not understand these things completely at the present time. Our heart knows in its deepest recesses. And as we follow our hearts and our intuition, we are led back home. The concept of reincarnation and of past life regression relates to many branches of science, not only physics. Susie, in the next story, discusses how she has Soulmate. This is a part of Zindagi Ki Roshni consultancy. It has been established for those who have lost someone and for those who are very sad in their life. About 100 PDF books and 20 short audio books of this topic will be sent to those who join it. This data will be sent to their email or WhatsApp. If you want to join this organization, then please send WhatsApp message to this number.